Okay, welcome back. This is pinch pots part 2. So you've let your pinch pots dry a little bit differently. One wasn't in the bag at all, and you can see one dry. So it's this dusty gray color. It is really easily breakable at this point. So I also have this one that is like a tent. So I want to unwrap these. I want you to unwrap yours and take a look at them. This one that's like a tent, after this, mine has been sitting for many days, more days than what you have. I think you have 2 or so, but this is still leather hard. So in other words, you can see that it's a different color almost, or different value. So that this dusty gray color, the bone dry, you can tell it's definitely different than that. But it's got some rigidity to it. So it's called leather hard because, like a piece of thick leather, it has some flexibilities to it still, but it also has this nice rigidity to it that you're able to work on it without it collapsing quite as easily. So at this point, I can also use like I use the knuckle, and I can polish the clay. So that's called burnishing. So any little cracks that are there will disappear. I can also use tools like I can use my scraper on the outside especially, and it will kind of work like a road grater. It takes off all the high points, and then I can collect it and then drop any collection of bits into divots, just like the road grater does. Right? It takes the excess and then it drops off into the pocket. So you can see that that is really kind of cleaning it up quite a bit. If I were to do this with plastic clay, it would just kind of really fall apart on me. It's so plastic, it's so loosey-goosey in your hands, I guess. So this is the rubber rib, and so I'm using the side that has an angle to it, and that will make it so that your clay is compressed and burnished a little bit more even after you've used this. So almost like using rough sandpaper versus fine grit. It kind of helps smooth like that. Then I can go back over and burnish with my knuckle, or you could use the back of a tool. Like sometimes people would prefer to use the back of a wood tool. A lot of Native Americans would use polished rocks. So they would find a really smooth rock that's been worn by water, and then they would use it, and they would use it so many times that they would pass it down from generation to generation as a polishing rock. So they often made their pieces so smooth that they looked like they were glazed that way. You don't have to do that. I just want you to kind of practice those things. Try burnishing and try using your tools. And then the inside looks a lot different, right? I have my fingernail prints in there, so I can go back in now and use the rubber rib on the inside. I can use a small end. And the rubber rib can help shape it too. So I can use this side to push it out some. Yeah. If I want to change the shape and the shape of my hand, it'll push it into the shape of my hand, if that's what you want. And then I just go back in with my fingertips to get those gouges out. Okay, so I also have the lip to deal with, so I can kind of polish that. And I can look at thin areas versus thicker areas. I could pinch that out more, but if I pinch the thicker area more, then it will tend to make it taller. And that's okay. I could always cut that down. by doing something like shaving that down if I wanted to. If I want this to be straight across anyway. So I am not going to grade you on the quality of this piece. I want you to practice here so that you know about how that happens, how quality can be achieved here. So I will be grading you on that later, if that makes sense. This is just the practice. So try this out on this leather hard piece. So you can play around with that one and then open the one that you covered where you chased all of the air out of it. And you tuck that in on the inside too, you chase all the air out of it on the inside. So this one, see, is still plastic. So you see the difference. This one is still, this one has some rigidity to it. This one is really still pretty wobbly. And that's been sitting even longer than yours has. That's been sitting for over a week probably. So if you cover your piece, the huge thing to know is if you cover your piece really well and chase all the air out of it, then you shouldn't have any problems with it becoming bone dry. So practice some of these things, and then when you're finished, you'll take them and like this, you'll add to your slip, and then you'll just slake it down in water. So we'll put water on over the top of those. And the last thing I want you to do before you slake everything down is to get a small piece of clay, and we'll score, slip, and weld some things together. So I will show you that before we slake all of this down. All right. Okay, so you're gonna grab a little piece of clay, and you can make a really small pinch pot, or you can make a small coil. We're gonna add something to one of these. Probably good to make, let's say, a foot. So this is the body, this is the lip, the body of the vessel, the lip of the vessel. And then a foot is just something that goes on the very bottom so that it makes it stand without falling over, makes it just have a little bit of a lift up off the table. It can be pretty ornate, but it doesn't have to be. It might be that we hardly see it at all. It just gives it a little bit of lift. So it could be just a simple coil. So it could do something like this and make this coil into a little donut, basically. And you want the foot to always be tucked underneath. So in other words, you wouldn't want it really big like this. You wouldn't want it to be sitting out real clunky. So I've got this donut thing, which isn't very pretty right now, but I'll clean it up. Then I'm going to add it to my leather hard piece. And most likely that's what you'll be doing throughout the semester, but even if you're adding plastic clay to plastic clay, you want to do this. So I'm going to add it down here at the bottom, like I said. So I'm going to score it, and that's just kind of like taking a piece of meat and tenderizing it. So you're scoring this area that it's going to attach to. And I'm just scoring the thing that I'm attaching, the foot. So this idea is where you're taking two things that are rough and then you join them together. That fit works better than two pieces that are smooth and fitting them together. They have a tendency to slide and come apart easier. So I've got them scored, but now I need to slip. So I usually use one of my wood tools to just transfer slip over. So I have slip in that I poured out and put into a little container if you want to do it that way, or just grab it out of your container. whichever way works best for you. And then I'm going to add my piece to it. I always add too much slip on. In other words, it's gonna ooze out, but that's what you want because you don't want any air to be trapped in between those two pieces. Trapped air will cause an explosion. So no air pockets, no bubbles. So plenty of slip will have a tendency to chase those air pockets away. Plus, it kind of works like a glue. So now I'm going to weld those pieces together. So how I do that is often when they're tiny like this little tool can get in, and I'll pull clay from one side of the new clay down to the old piece, so whatever I'm joining it to. So I did that on the inside of the coil, and I'll go back and clean that up because it looks kind of gnarly. But right now, I just want to get it attached, welded on there. So I'm welding on the outside too. And if you don't do this with your pieces, you can get them to stick, yes, through it being plastic and maybe even leather hard. And sometimes it'll even make it through being bone dry. But it's risky. If it comes apart when it's bone dry or even when it's bisque fired, then you have no recourse. You have no way to fix it. So add something to your piece at a foot and take a photo of it when you are finished. Also, try carving into these. You can carve into the bone dry pieces. You can try any of your tools. A lot of people like to try the needle tool. This is the plastic clay. This is the leather hard clay. You can add, try to make designs, you know, see the different thicknesses of lines. What does that look like here versus there, which works better? When I'm carving away, often the leather hard clay is the best because it doesn't, it works better to carve in leather hard clay. Sorry.
And Carla Navarrete to reception, please.
Leather hard clay usually carves easier. It has less of a cleanup to do. In other words, when you are carving away in plastic clay, all of the extra clay just kind of folds over instead of falling out of it. When it's a little bit drier, leather hard, it has a tendency to fall away, and that way you can clean it up easier. Okay, this is kind of early stages of leather hard, so it's not quite the same. And I recommend when you're working, try to use something that's a little bit thicker than this needle tool, because often you'll be working really close and the lines that you're making here, while visible, are not as visible once you add glaze to this. So maybe something like a dull pencil line is the thinnest that I would go. And then vary lines, right? So try textures and things like that and have fun playing around with this. Once you're finished, throw all of your pieces back here after you've taken a photo, put them in here to slate down. Unless you have pieces that are plastic still. So like this, I'm not gonna put in there because that just creates more work for me. This is so good clay, I can use it. This piece is still plastic, so I can wad it up and very easily put it back in my bag of clay and reuse it, this leather hard piece, to dry. Leather hard and bone dry pieces need to be recycled. Okay.